Okay, Margherita, benvenuta. Welcome.
Grazie, ciao.
Thank you for being here. Before we get into everything, we've got a lot to go over today. Maybe just tell people who don't yet know who you are, where you're from, and how Italian Matters came to be.
Yes, so my name is Margherita Berti and I am from Bergamo, Italy. I was raised in Italy and then I moved to the United States. I think it was in 2015 for my husband and also my studies. I studied languages and linguistics for 10 years. And I also started an online language school, Italian Matters, and we teach Italian online for about 5 years now with Italian courses and really helping people become fluent with the language.
That's amazing. And I love Bergamo. I went there for the first time
Oh.
last year. It was really nice.
Yes. I miss it. I miss Bergamo.
Do you get to go back and visit often?
Yeah, I try to go back twice a year. It depends on the year, usually twice, maybe once. But my whole family lives in Italy, so I go back to visit. Yeah.
Okay. Do you spend a lot of time in Città Alta?
Yes. So Città Alta is the best part, I think, of Bergamo. I don't know if you visited that, and then the lower part of the city. It's very nice because you can walk around. There are no cars. You can just, go and take your walks and go to a bar, get an espresso, and just enjoy the Italian lifestyle there. So,
Yes.
yeah.
One thing I noticed about Bergamo, I've never seen so many gelaterias in one place.
Yeah. The stracciatella, I don't know if you have ever tried the stracciatella flavor, which is just like a milky type of gelato with some chocolate shavings. That is typical of Bergamo. It was invented in Bergamo. So, yeah.
Yes, I definitely noticed that. Great. Well, let's get right into it. So today, we'll obviously be talking about the Italian language. I've been living in Italy for about 4 years now, so I have some experience as somebody who learned and is still learning Italian because it's a process, it's a journey.
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions from people about, how to learn Italian, whether it's just for fun or maybe for various different certificates that they need. Everybody has a different reason for learning Italian. I would say, I don't know, it seems like a lot of people do it just because they enjoy it. Maybe some people want to move to Italy, so they feel it's necessary to learn it, or they just want to travel in Italy, or maybe they need a certificate. So we'll talk about the certificate first, get the boring part out of the way, and then get to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So one certificate that's very often required is a B1 certificate, Italian language, which is the level.
Right.
And that's required for certain people. That's required for certain people, and it depends on what you're doing. There's a big misconception that a lot of people need a B1 language certificate to get Italian citizenship in all cases. And you do in some cases. For example, if you are married to an Italian citizen and you yourself want to get Italian citizenship, you have to pass a B1 language exam and get the certificate. If you move to Italy and want to naturalize as an Italian citizen, then you would have to pass the language exam as well. So for naturalization, you do, unless you are like a child of immigrants in Italy and you were raised in Italy, went to school in Italy, then in some cases, in a lot of those cases, then you're exempt from that exam because you can prove, I went to middle and high school.
Right.
And I don't know if any of those people are listening to this podcast, so it probably doesn't apply to anybody listening to this anyways. But for most people who are probably listening to this or watching this, if you're going to move to Italy and you want to become a citizen through naturalization, you would need to pass a language exam there. But for getting citizenship through Ancestry, which is what I happen to do, and a lot of other people are going through that as well, there's not actually a language requirement for that. A lot of people are pushing for that. Not going to get into that debate. There was a law proposed to make it a requirement this year, but it didn't, or last year, but it didn't pass. So as of now, as of we're recording, which is May 2026, there's not a language requirement to get citizenship through Ancestry. That said, I think everybody who wants to get their Italian citizenship, regardless of how, should learn and be able to speak Italian to an extent. But before we get into all that, when I say B1 level and the B1 certificate, what does that actually mean?
Yes. So when we look at learning foreign languages, Italian, Spanish, French, doesn't really matter. We can use the European framework to look at the levels. And for Italian here, there is the A1 and A2 levels, which are the beginner levels. And then there is B1 and B2, intermediate, and C1 and C2 advanced. And those are the levels based on the European framework. And so B1 is a lower intermediate level that you need to get to in order to get this certificate. So lower intermediate. And that usually means that you need to be able to speak in Italian using the past, passato prossimo, imperfetto, the present as well. The present is the most used Italian tense, so it is so important, present tense. And then the future as well. So those tenses are tenses that you should know. You should learn at the A1, A2 levels. And then for the B1, you know those. You should also know a bit of the conditional, those tenses that are a bit more advanced. But for verbs, past, present, and future are so important for the B1 level to be at that level. And then in terms of using the language, everyday language, you need to be able to talk about yourself, your daily routine, your job, what you do, your family, all these kind of topics related to everyday life. That is something that you should be able to do, to speak about when you are at the B1 lower intermediate level.
Okay. And do you see that a lot of people are specifically looking for those certificates, the people you interact with?
Yeah, so a lot of the students that we get in my courses, so we have beginner, again, A1, A2, intermediate, B1, B2, and advanced, C1, C2. A lot of them take the beginner level course and then the intermediate level course to be able to get to that B1 level once they finish the beginner and they do some of intermediate level, because they want to get the certificate and they're interested in being able to use the language, not just getting the Italian citizenship, but also being able to speak Italian as part of that process of becoming an Italian citizen.
Okay, great. So
Yes.
in terms of, there's a lot of theory and practice and certificates, and there's of course a million courses out there. What is the reality of learning Italian? So if we're talking about like what people are working towards, there's the next question that everybody asks is like, how long is this actually going to take?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that question a lot on social media. So there are so many factors that play into language learning, into learning Italian, and I cannot give you a, let's say, number of hours or days or months that is going to take to learn Italian, because it depends so much on yourself, on you, and your first language is going to influence how you learn your second language. Or maybe if you have already learned a second language, you have some experience with language learning. And so learning a third language for you, it is probably going to be a bit easier. If you are a native Spanish speaker, so we're looking at Romance languages, Spanish, French, Portuguese, those languages belong to the same language family as Italian, so Romance languages. Probably is going to be a bit easier for you compared to someone who comes from German, for example. And so there are too many factors that play into that. Having said that, if we focus on native English speakers, Italian is one of the easier languages to learn for native English speakers compared to, for example, Chinese or Russian or other languages that are a bit more complex and quite different. To get to the B1 level, I cannot give you an exact, let's say, number of days, but I would say that you can get to a great level over 6-7 months. If you are studying every day, you're being consistent, you can get to through B1, A2, and you get closer to that B1 level. So
I can say from my experience, again, I have never taken an Italian language exam. I don't know what level I am.
okay.
That being said, when I decided to move to Italy, I had about 5 months before I was going to actually move, and I started from zero. I literally
Okay.
just knew grazie and ciao. So I was starting from square one. I
Yeah.
knew a little bit of Spanish, but not that much. I was conversational with Spanish. It took me about 5 or 6 months to get conversational with Italian, so that when I arrived in Italy, I was able to
Great.
have basic but decent conversations with people, and that was
Yeah.
I did 3 lessons, 3 1-hour lessons every week. and I was listening to podcasts, watching movies, listening
Yes.
to music, doing as much as I could. I wouldn't say it was intensive study because I was still, working a full-time job, but I was
Yeah.
studying quite a lot. So for me, a normal, I wouldn't consider myself gifted. It was about 6 months to get conversational. I'm sure I
Yeah.
was not B1, but for me, conversation was a huge goal.
Yeah. And I like that you said that because it also depends on the materials that you're using. So if you are, for example, just using a grammar textbook and maybe you're doing one lesson a week with a tutor, you're going to be missing a lot on language input. So when you're learning Italian, you need to use a variety of materials. You need to be listening to podcasts, just like you said you did, and watch movies, all of those things. And when you usually do just one thing, it's likely not enough. You need to use a variety of materials that help you develop all 4 language skills. So,
Yeah, I think that for me, it was basically all of the above. Also, for me, it was important when I found teachers to do conversation practice with. I told them specifically, speak like you normally speak. Don't
yeah,
speak like pure Italian, because I know that nobody really speaks that in Italy. So
right.
if you're from Florence, speak to me like you're from Florence. If you're from Naples,
Yeah,
to a lesser extent, speak like you're from Naples. That's a different thing. But yeah, and for me, I just wanted to hear it I wanted to hear all angles so that I was getting more and more used to the different styles. Of course, there's a balance to take there. I wouldn't recommend somebody starting from zero to just turn on Gomorra and think they're going to learn how to speak Italian,
yeah,
because that's not.
right.
That's very different. Yeah, so for me it was a lot of that. I would say I probably could have been, and still could be, more rigorous academically. I never just sat
Okay.
down with a book and was like studiously reading a book, like
Yeah,
teaching Italian grammar. I know that would be helpful, but for me, I just wanted to be able to talk to people, and I got to
yeah,
that point. But you do realize you reach a limit and you want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing as
right,
conversations get more advanced, and you want to be yourself as much as you can and have your personality come through, and you have ideas you want to share, but you don't know the vocabulary. You just feel like
right.
frustrated. So
Yeah.
it's good to keep pushing.
Yeah, and it's good, and it's good to be consistent as well. So while maybe you were not reading a textbook and sitting down and writing things, I think what maybe made a difference with you, but what I see also makes a difference with my students is really just being consistent. So you're not
Hmm.
studying 1 hour a week, and then next week you're doing maybe cramming everything over 5 hours, and then you don't
No.
do anything for a month. That just doesn't help with language learning, but being consistent a little bit every day or every other day, that is going to make a big difference for becoming conversational.
Yes, it's very much like playing an instrument. It's like you can't
Hmm.
do that you can't do that one day a week for 6 hours and then not touch it the other days of the week. It really is.
Right.
I would think a little bit every day is better than a lot every few days, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What about people who aren't necessarily going for a certificate? So maybe we'll say tourists, which is a lot of people. I would say probably half the people listening to this maybe aren't trying to get citizenship, have no intentions of moving to Italy, but they just want to travel in Italy and are more interested than the average tourist, and they want to actually engage a
Yeah.
bit. So when it comes to travel, I think learning a language is extremely important. Well, let me back up. I think it's pretty important. It's not necessary. You don't have to speak Italian to go to Italy. I think it makes it much more fun, much more interesting. It helps you connect with the culture a lot more. I think it really does completely change your experience. And I have many examples, but could you think of what do you think are the most useful phrases for tourists?
Yeah, I think it depends usually on where you're going to be. So if you know as a tourist that you're going to be going to a restaurant or maybe a theater, you're going to watch an opera, then I will focus on those phrases, the language that is going to be helpful for you in those settings. But if there is a general area that I think everyone should be focusing on, is probably politeness. So being able to say grazie, thank you, prego, you're welcome, buongiorno, good morning, all those type of phrases that you will be using because they're used in everyday language. so that you can show politeness to Italians. And usually Italians, they get very excited if you can speak in even a little bit of the language, but will really enjoy yourself speaking Italian. And so politeness, greetings, those type of things, and then focus on the language that you know you will be using because you will be in that specific setting. Another verb that comes to mind is vorrei, I would like. So vorrei un caffè. Vorrei questa maglietta. I would like this t-shirt. You can use that at the restaurant, but when you're shopping, just a variety of situations.
Yes. And I've noticed that Italians, if you pronounce something correctly, it can go one of two ways. If you pronounce something well, they'll respond in Italian.
Yes.
If you pronounce something poorly, they'll just respond in English. And don't be offended. They just know, especially if you're in an area where there are a lot of tourists, they're used to that. So don't feel like, man, I worked so hard on how to say buongiorno properly, and they just responded, hello.
Yeah, but I think Italians want to practice English too. So if they know that you are from the US, you're traveling to Italy, and they can catch that American accent, they want to practice English with you, and that is sometimes why they respond in English, because they want to be able to practice the language as well.
Yes, and it really depends on the person. The age almost doesn't even really matter. Maybe if somebody's really, really old, they probably only know Italian, or if somebody's really, really young, they only know Italian. But if everybody in the middle, they can either get really excited or they don't speak any English at all, and they just come at you with Italian.
Yeah.
And I would also suggest to people, as soon as you can, if you're moving to Italy, as soon as you can, find friends that don't speak English. Because you want to hang out with people that don't default to English, because it happens so often. Find friends where you're forced to speak in Italian. Of course, you need to have a certain level of conversation before you can get to that point.
Yeah.
But do that as soon as you can, because it will open up new social circles. It will improve your Italian. It will teach you new things. That was a big hack for me.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I know of students who move to Italy and then they are just around people who speak only English, and then their language development is much slower compared to someone who goes there and just says, okay, I'm just going to be around Italians. I am forced to speak the language. And that just makes a big difference.
Yes. And it also depends on where you go and how hard you have to try to find those people. If you go to Florence, that's probably one of the hardest places to learn Italian in Italy, because it's basically the 51st U.S. state at this point. It's just full of Americans. A lot of people in Florence are going to be so offended by that statement. But
it's a nice city. I understand. I get it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, but it is very easy to fall into the bubble of other, I'll say expats for lack of a better term, because there is a comfort in speaking your native language with other people, because you can just, all the slang and everything is completely understandable. So it's comfortable, but you need a balance. You want to have that, but also, hang out with people where you don't have that luxury.
Right. Yeah.
I'm curious, this was not on our topics, but what was your experience like learning English? You speak English very well. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, in Italy, we start learning a second language very early on. So for me, I started learning English when I was 6, elementary school. I didn't learn it very well until college, because the focus was mainly on grammar, just really learning the grammar, learning the rules, and not speaking the language. And that's a problem that I see as well with students who come into my courses. They maybe know all the grammar rules, they know all the conjugations, but they haven't practiced speaking. And the goal of learning any language, I think in most cases, 99% of the cases, is to speak the language, to communicate, to connect, not to just learn a grammar rule and that is it, because I cannot do anything with that. I need to be able to produce and speak the language. And so for me, learning English, I focused so much in school on grammar and not on speaking. And I remember when I did my exchange year in the United States, so my 4th year of high school was in the US, I couldn't I couldn't speak. I know I knew all the grammar and vocabulary, but I couldn't speak the language. I remember, for example, I wanted to say I'm excited, and I would say I am excited. Excited. I would read that the Italian way, excited, instead of excited. I realized that was a problem. I didn't speak the language. Then once I got to college, that is when things got better, studying linguistics, studying languages, and focusing more on communication and not so much on just grammar rules and some vocabulary. So it depends on the method and what you're doing as well.
It's funny, the opposite with excited happens in Italian for foreigners that are learning Italian. They say, io sono eccitato.
Non va bene, it's not good. You don't want to say that. I know, yes.
So you spent senior year in the U.S. Where were you in the U.S.?
In Indiana, yes. And that's where I met my now husband in high school in Indiana, yes. And
wow.
When I arrived, I couldn't speak. It was a problem. I thought, I can speak. I've been studying since I was 6. I can speak English here. And then you are in the reality, you are immersed in the reality of the English speaking world. And I haven't practiced speaking, so I couldn't really speak.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, you've gotten to this point, so well done.
Thank you.
I can't imagine English is very hard. In fact, I can't imagine English is very easy. In fact, when I'm speaking with Italians and they ask me something about English, like, why do you do this? Why do you do this? And I think, why do we do that? It makes no sense. Some of the rules in English, it just is that way. I mean, the worst case is just words that, I don't remember, there's a technical word that you probably know, but it's when words are pronounced the same, but they're spelled completely differently. Like the number 8 and then ho mangiato, I ate. E-I-G-H-T versus A-T-E, the pronunciation is the same, but the spelling could not be more different.
English pronunciation is very hard. Italian pronunciation is, from a linguistic perspective, is very easy. Because in Italian, usually you have a letter and the corresponding sound. That is it. In English, it really depends so much on the letter combination and where the letter is in a word, the beginning, the ending. It's very difficult to learn English pronunciation compared to Italian. And I know many English speakers say Italian pronunciation is hard. And I understand, but it is easier than English pronunciation overall.
Yes, I would agree. I think linguistically you're 100% right. But there's something about when I'm speaking Italian or other foreigners are speaking Italian with decent pronunciation, and Italians will make fun of or call out things that I say wrong. That is, I know it's wrong, but it's barely wrong, but it makes them laugh so much. I feel like in the U.S., I'm literally just thinking out loud. Maybe in the U.S. we're more used to hearing a lot of different accents. So if we hear like a Mexican speaking English, we just don't even really hear the accent that much because we're so used to it. That it's not like if they say something funny, it's like, okay, whatever. We're not like correcting them. It's just, okay, that's a Mexican accent. I don't know. I feel like the pronunciation in Italian is so precise. Like it's so...
It is. And I can see that. I think it depends also on the person that you're speaking to. Some people are going to correct you. Others are going to be very happy that you used that word and that you spoke Italian. It really depends. In the US, generally when people hear my Italian accent, because it does come out when I speak English, people are happy to hear my Italian accent. So it's okay. It's okay to have an accent. And if you speak Italian with an American accent, I also want to tell you it's okay. It's no problem at all. But some people might correct you if maybe you don't quite pronounce that double consonant correctly 100%.
Yeah. I think the Italian accent when you're speaking English is much more charming than the American accent when you're speaking in Italian. They just don't like it, except with a few exceptions. But I think and honestly, when I hear an American speaking Italian with a very, like, it's like they're not even trying to pronounce it correct. It's like io posso mangiare qualcosa. It's when I hear that, I'm like, just stop, just go back to English. But for example, the other day I was talking with some friends and they said, when you say the word cosa, you put too much on the S. Like I say, ci sono tante cose, and they're like, it's not cose, it's cose. It's
Così. Yeah.
it's like
And
shorter, and I'm like, I've known you guys for 3 years, and you're just now telling me this.
it's a rule actually. You know, if you know the rule, so when you have a letter S between vowels in Italian, the rule is that you get a Z sound. So cose and not cose. So if you know all those pronunciation rules, and there aren't many in Italian, then yeah, it's just a tiny thing.
I have a confession to make about that, though, about the S. I learned that very early on. If you have an S between two vowels, it's a Z sound, but I learned that the S comes from the South, and I said I want it to sound like somebody from the South, because that's where my ancestry comes from. So I intentionally make it an S sound.
It's okay then.
But their point was that I drag it out too much. It's like cose. They're like, stop putting too much on the S.
Okay. It does sound a bit long. I still understand you, and I think context helps. It sounds a little bit long. For me, it's not a problem. You can say cause I would understand you.
Yeah. I guess it's when you make friends with an Italian and you get close enough and they feel comfortable giving you constructive criticism. That's when it comes out. It's like, oh, okay, guys, that's fine. Let's work on your English then.
Yeah.
Anything else about traveling? Italian for travelers, Italian for tourism?
Let's see. We could talk about common errors since we are on this topic right now. Errors that come up for Italian learners to travel in Italy.
I know I've made more than a few errors. I guess a good one would be, what is the correct way to ask for, let's say you're at a bar, a coffee shop, a bar, and you say, and you're already sitting there, you've already been there for a while, so they see you there, and maybe you want a bottle of water.
Yeah.
Do you say, you could say, posso avere una bottiglia di acqua, but that's just like, can I have, is that too informal?
It's not too informal. If we look at how native Italian speakers would ask for that, they would say una bottiglia d'acqua, per favore. That's
just
it,
right
without
to
the
the
verb.
Without the verb.
Exactly. Like it's the same way when you go get a coffee at the counter. Un caffè grazie, without the verb. That is how native Italians usually order this type of things. But if you say posso avere una bottiglia d'acqua, that works too. It is polite. If you want to be even more polite, you could say vorrei, I would like, vorrei una bottiglia d'acqua. They all work, but Italian speakers, native Italian speakers usually tend to omit verbs, omit subject pronouns as well. So it is not io vorrei, I would like. It is vorrei without the io, without the I. They tend to be quick with the language and how they speak.
Okay. What about I know when you're studying Italian, there's a big emphasis on the formal versus informal, lei versus sei or tu. But okay, in reality, in 2026, how much is that actually used with? When do you use that? How do you use that? To me, it feels, this is going to sound so stupid. I feel timid talking to older people in Italy, like anziani, because I want to be polite and I know you're supposed to say grazie a lei. But what if it's like my neighbor that I see every single day? When do you use lei? When do you use tu? When do you, it just, it's confusing.
Yeah, I can explain that. Yeah. So in Italian, we have formal and informal language. So formal language is that lei, the third person singular, and informal language is the tu, meaning you, and it is the second person singular. So if you're using lei, you're using a certain verb form, certain verb ending. If you're using tu, you're going to use another type of verb ending, another type of verb form. And usually we are going to use lei with people who we don't know well, with a professor, a teacher, the police. We're going to use lei, people who are older than us. Tu is used with family, friends, kids. Now, I would say that in recent years, lei has been used a bit less compared to the past, but I think it still should be used. It is important to be polite. I know it's more work because you have to learn more verb endings, but it's important older people appreciate it when you're using formal language and you're using the live form, and in a work situation as well. At the university, people use the live form, formal language. It is still used.
Okay. How do you navigate the confusion that can arise when, let's say you're my professor and I'm talking
Yes.
to you about something, and there's a girl over here, maybe a classmate, and I say lei, and you don't know if
Yeah.
I'm talking to you or if I'm talking
Yeah.
about her, because the sentence could go to either person. What is
Right.
how do you? Because
It's
I
this.
see that happen. I literally see that every day with my neighbor, because she has a woman that stays with her to help, and they
Yeah.
have a cat, a female cat. So when
Mhm.
she's talking to her about lei vuole mangiare, it's like io non ho fame.
It's
No,
yeah.
lei.
I will just use hand gestures and I'm looking at you, I'm speaking to you. It's really the same. It is the same. So context helps, and who you're looking at, and maybe you're pointing to the cat. That is going to help, but it is the same. Yes.
Okay, so hand gestures. Maybe that's why hand gestures are so common in Italy. Okay. Let's see. So let's move on. So if we're talking about Italian for ancestry and citizenship, we talked a bit about, the B1 certificate that's required for some
Yes.
people. But if we're just talking about people with Italian ancestry in general, so I'm co-founder of a company called Become Italiani, where we help people get Italian citizenship through their ancestry, help them kind of reconnect with their roots. And of course, we're dealing with a lot of people who are aspiring to learn Italian, or a lot of them just feel a very strong cultural tie or a familial tie to the culture. Even if they're, geographically distant from it, they still want to connect with it. So if somebody's talking about their Italian roots, their Italian family history, what are some things that people can use to talk about that? For example, if they're talking about my ancestors came from this town, my origins are Italian, they come from this region, this city, my nonno, nonna, bisnonno. If somebody's talking about their ancestry, their family, what are some common phrases? What's some good vocabulary to know?
Yes. So I would focus on the verb essere, to be. So for example, io sono di, I am from. Io sono di Bergamo. And then, yes, learn the family related words. I miei nonni, my grandparents. I miei nonni sono di. My grandparents are from. I miei antenati. So ancestors, my ancestors are from. I miei antenati sono di. I would also use the verb venire, another verb we can use. I miei bisnonni vengono da, they come from. So this type of words, family related words, the verb essere, to be, the verb venire, to come, this type of verbs that relate to family language and talking about your roots.
So you would even say i miei antenati vengono, even if we're talking about 100 years ago, you say
I would
vengono
use that.
the present? Okay.
Vengono da, exactly. Vengono da.
Okay. Would you ever use the passato remoto in any of this?
Not really. So the passato remoto is a type of past tense that is not used much anymore in spoken Italian. You can hear it a little bit in southern Italy. In northern Italy, central Italy, it is not used that much anymore in spoken language. And so I wouldn't focus on that. I recommend focusing instead on the passato prossimo, that is the present perfect, just because it is the most common type of past tense in Italian, and it is a bit challenging, so that is the type of past tense that I would focus on. The passato remoto is more advanced. So if you're reaching that C1, C2 level, yes, you're ready for the passato remoto, but I wouldn't work on that before then.
What if we're talking about maybe geography? So if you're talking
Mhm.
about coming from a city versus a region versus, because there's a difference between
Yeah,
a Napoli, in Sicilia, things like
yes.
this.
Yeah. And so the preposition a, in, it
Mhm.
changes based on what comes after. So you can say sono di Bergamo. I am from Bergamo. Vengo da Bergamo. So sono uses di, vengo uses da with the city. Or if I want to say I am in Bergamo, sono a Bergamo. a with a city, meaning that I am in that place. If you want to say that you are in a region, then sono in Lombardia. So, sono a Bergamo, I am in Bergamo. Sono in Lombardia, I am in the Lombardy region. So it really depends on the verb that you're using. Usually it is going to be either sono or vengo. And then what comes after. If it is a city, if it is a region, if it is a country even, or an island, the preposition is going to change.
Okay. And if you're talking about a region, use the article, right? So you would say, i miei antenati vengono dalla campagna.
Bravo, sì, esattamente. Exactly. So if you want to use the verb venire, I miei antenati vengono dalla. So there you have a preposition da and then the article la. They go together and we get what we call a complex preposition or preposizione articolata in Italian. And so you have the preposition with article together. I miei antenati vengono dalla campagna.
Is that the same for every region? Is it always dalla Valle d'Aosta?
Dalla Lombardia, dal Lazio, it's not the same. So it depends on whether the region is considered masculine or feminine. So Lazio, dal, it is not dalla, dal Lazio.
Okay. Vengono dall'Umbria.
Dall'Umbria you have the apostrophe because Umbria starts with the U, with a vowel. And so you're not going to have an A and an U close together. Dal apostrophe Umbria. Dall'Umbria.
Okay. Interesting. All these tiny details.
Yes.
It's good to know.
A lot of details, yes.
And these are all details that are good to know to speak properly. But if you're just traveling in Italy, these are smaller details that aren't going to really affect your ability to navigate around.
Yeah, and you don't need to learn all the variations. You can learn what is relevant to you. So if I want to say I am from the United States, I'm just going to learn that preposition and article they go together that are specific to the United States. So vengo dagli Stati Uniti. I come from the United States. I'll just focus on that.
Yeah, and that's a unique one because the United States is plural, which is
exactly.
kind of weird for a country to be plural. There's I don't know how many countries are there that are. There's not many.
Yeah,
maybe
not many.
the UAE, United States, the Netherlands, but now you just say Olanda.
Olanda, sì. Vengo dall'Olanda, sì.
Yeah. I think for anybody who is trying to get, whether they're getting their citizenship or not, just trying to reconnect with their heritage, I think it's so important. I can't really explain. You can't understand until you experience how rewarding it is to be able to speak the language. And I can give you a perfect example. When I first came to Italy, the first time, didn't speak any Italian. My cousin and I went to, I've told this story a million times, so I'm going to abbreviate it. But my cousin and I went to the town that our ancestors were from, near Salerno.
Okay. Yes.
And we didn't speak any Italian, so we needed a translator with us. Luckily, there was this really nice, helpful American guy that lives there. And he showed us around. We met the mayor. We met, distant family ancestors. We didn't really know how we were connected, but we knew we had the same last name. And it was amazing, but we needed a translator for the whole thing. And then a year later, after I had moved to Italy, so I had been in Italy for about 7 months at this point. So I had been studying Italian for almost a year at this point. I went back to that town. This time I brought my dad and his sister, so this was where their grandparents were from, to show them around. And this time I was the translator, which was amazing. That I was able to do this in a relatively short amount of time for me. And it was like my dad and my aunt, they wouldn't have been able to communicate with anybody there. Nobody spoke English really. So that was really rewarding for me. We got to go see my great-grandfather's house where he lived. And I can't explain how much speaking another languages unlocks things. It just opens so much up, experiences you never expected to have. I mean, it makes sense. So the most amazing experiences come from connecting with people, and to connect with people, you need to speak with them. And if you can speak it sounds so obvious when I say it out loud, but you don't realize it until it happens. Like, oh, wow, there was this barrier between us and now it's down a bit. Maybe not 100% because there's still always, especially somebody from Southern Italy, they have the dialect, etc. But I recommend everybody do it.
And, it's also good exercise for the brain, learning a foreign language, learning Italian. It really helps you think differently, helps you exercise your brain, and again, connecting with people in a way that you wouldn't be able to connect if you didn't know the language. So,
Yes, yes. Speaking of that, I was going to save this for the end, but when it comes to learning a language, a lot of people just say, I'm too old to learn a language. Or, I'm
Yep.
older, so it'll be slower, or it's harder for older people. And I looked this up once, so I can't say I researched it, but I remember some study somewhere where they found that older people have a harder time picking up the correct pronunciation, but they learn vocabulary faster than younger people. What's been your experience?
I haven't quite seen that. I think it really depends from person to person and from the resources, support that they have, how they're studying the language. Usually, older people, I would say, they have more experience with the world in general and their own language and things. And so it can be a bit easier for them to learn the language because they have other experiences that they bring in with learning Italian. But it really depends from person to person. And you're never too old to learn Italian. It is good exercise for your brain to learn the language, even if you are, I don't know, in your 70s and 80s. It is still good for you to do that. So
I agree. We'll see when I get older if I realize, oh man, I was so wrong. It is actually so much harder when you're older, but I think that's just an excuse. I think people just need to learn it, at least try. I don't know. I'm sure there's disadvantages and advantages on both sides, but
yeah, and sometimes sometimes people are retired, and so they have more time on their hands to learn Italian, and they can just learn the language and spend more time with the language as compared to someone who's maybe in their 40s and they have kids and they have a job. So it really depends on the person and the situation.
Yeah. And I think it really does, like you said, it just comes down to the person. I mean, I have friends that have been here for half the time as me, and they picked up Italian so fast. And I don't know how. And I think it also comes down to where they're from. I found that for some reason, people from Iran pick up Italian so fast, and I'm really jealous of them. I can't figure out why that is, but it just is.
Yeah. Where did you come from? Your first language, what you have done in the past, they all play a role in language learning.
Yeah. So speaking of, whether people are living in Italy or not living in Italy, a lot of times that can factor into your ability to learn a language. Most of the people listening to this and watching it probably are not living in Italy. They're probably in the US, Australia, Canada, maybe the UK.
Yeah.
So they don't have the advantage of being surrounded by the language every day. Everybody emphasizes immersion.
Yes.
Of course, wouldn't it be great if we could all just go spend 3 months in Italy, but not everybody can do that. How do you make real progress not being in Italy?
Yeah, that is the best case scenario. So if you could go and just live in Italy for 6 months, then yes, you would be seeing a lot of progress. But not everybody can do that. And I've seen students who have not been in Italy, not even, on vacation. They have not been in Italy at all. Yet they're fluent in Italian. They learn Italian in their home country. And it is about being immersed, but where you are, which means that I'm going to watch a movie in Italian with subtitles. When I'm driving to work, I'm going to listen to an Italian podcast. When I'm waiting at the doctor's office, maybe I'm going to use an app to learn new vocabulary. It is about fitting the Italian language in those pockets of time that you have and being immersed in that way. Yes, you're not in Italy, but you are immersed in the language, in your own life and how you do things. And I'm driving, I'm cleaning the dishes, I'm doing this. I'm going to immerse myself in the language in that sense. So it's about integrating a variety of materials, getting a lot of language input, listening to the language, and then speaking out loud as well. You can speak to your dog, to yourself in Italian and just use what you know. It is a starting point. It is going to get better. Let's say that I learned how to tell my name today in Italian. I'm going to just say that out loud. I'm not just going to keep it inside my head.
That's a really good tip, because even if you might not have a person to to make sure you're saying it perfectly. You can listen to somebody saying it on a YouTube video or something and replicate it over and over and over, because there are certain sounds. Every language uses different muscles, so there are certain sounds and motions with the tongue that we, for example, as Americans, we don't have the yi sound. That doesn't exist. So that takes a while to learn how to do. And then the R, rolling the R's, all these things take practice. So do that in your home when you can embarrass yourself. Just say it, just develop those muscles.
Just say, like imperfect practice is still practice. It is still going to give you results. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to be speaking with a tutor for an hour, native Italian speaker, to make progress. Even speaking to yourself every day, even if it is just 15 minutes, maybe reading an Italian book out loud. Maybe it's not perfect, but it will give you results in the long term if you are being consistent.
Yes. And I would say for anybody listening who has a commute to work, if you're driving to work or walking to work, whatever, like you're talking about immersing, listening to music, podcasts, everything, that I think that people can kind of burn themselves out if they think they have to do that 100% of the time. So I would say just pick like a time a day, or maybe if their commute is 30 minutes, for the first 15 minutes from your house to that one store, listen to that one Italian podcast, and then you're done. Just do that every day, rather than being like, all right, now I got to listen to some other thing where they're talking about, the 800th shape of pasta. It's like, okay, I need like a change. Find some music that you like. There's so much different music in Italy. Find what you like, that you can connect with. That's another thing too, I will say, is when you're looking up things about Italy, because Italy identifies so much with its food and the culinary culture, it can be easy to find like all the content on the internet about Italy is about food, but it's not true. If you look in the right places, you can find something that's about, engineering or music or different kinds of things. Find the thing that you're interested in anyways, just in Italian.
Right, exactly. So you can find podcasts that are meant to be for native Italian speakers. Maybe you're interested in crime. So you're going to find an Italian crime podcast, and you are not going to be able to understand 100%, and that's okay. That is not the goal. The goal is to understand some of it, the main point that is made in the podcast. And then as you do that more and more, you will understand more and more of Italian language.
I would say too, speaking of finding podcasts for native speakers, is if you're somebody who does like podcasts, open up your favorite AI chat tool and say the podcast that you like. Me personally, I love like Neil Brennan and Scott Galloway. You just type in what do you listen to, what do you like, podcasts that you like, comedians, whatever it is you like to listen to, and say, what are the equivalent Italian podcasts that are very similar, the similar sense of humor, similar topics, similar themes, and it'll list you out some, and then go subscribe to those, and maybe you'll get hooked on something else.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great tip.
I wanted to ask, can you teach me some Bergamo dialect?
That's a good question. Yeah, I know some words.
Okay, let's start with the first. What do you call somebody from Bergamo? What's the correct, like Romano, Umbro, Perugino?
Bergamasco.
Bergamasco, Bergamasca.
Exactly. Yes, male and female. And a lot of different cities have their own dialects and regions, and the also Bergamasco dialect is not spoken much anymore. So, for example, my grandma used to speak that dialect, but not so much with me, because my mom being from Bergamo and my dad being from Monza, close to Milan, the Monzese dialect. Yeah, together, they didn't speak their dialects, we just spoke standard Italian. So I grew up speaking standard Italian, and I didn't learn much of a Bergamasco dialect, but there is one word, allura, which is allora in Italian, standard Italian allura in Bergamasco, but is very common.
Do you elongate the U, allura?
Allura. Well, in Italian, vowels don't have length. I would elongate that U just to put more emphasis on the word allura. But you don't need to. It can just be allura.
So allura. Yes. So if you say, use it just like you would allora.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about your book. Tell me about your book.
Yes, so it is called Speak the World Italian, History and Culture Through Language, and it is coming out this summer, so August 11th, and it is about learning those Italian words that are very common, proverbs, idioms that we use every day as native Italian speakers, and understanding the pronunciation and also where they come from. So, for example, why do we say in bocca al lupo? In bocca al lupo, in the mouth of a wolf for good luck in Italian. Why do we say that? Or why do we say acqua in bocca, meaning water in the mouth, with the meaning of keep it a secret? So in the book, I teach all these phrases and their origins and why we use them as native Italian speakers.
Okay. If you had to teach somebody one to learn that they can impress somebody with on their next trip to Italy.
And one word or phrase to learn. It could be, well, in bocca al lupo is a good one, but really just a word. Buongiorno. Buongiorno is a word that I would teach someone who's traveling to Italy and really learning that U-O combination. So it is not buongiorno, it is buongiorno. So both vowels need to be there with the meaning of good morning. Buongiorno.
Great. Well, I'm excited to read the book myself. So you said it comes out on August 11th.
11th, exactly. And people can find the book on Amazon. You can find that if you are in the US on Target, Walmart, Barnes and Nobles, all those retailers. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll put a link in the description below. For people to find you, where can they find you?
Italianmatters.com. That is my website of my online language school. And you can learn more about the courses that we offer. And also there is a podcast, since we talked about podcast. It is called Italian Grammar Made Easy, where we focus on Italian grammar, also vocabulary, and there are some episodes that are completely in Italian about Italian culture if you want to get that language input.
Okay, very good. Well, I will put the links to all of this in the show notes for those of you listening to the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put it in the description. I'll have a link to her Instagram as well, the courses and the book when it's out. And I think if you're serious about learning Italian, go find Margherita. I think even just your Instagram page alone will teach you something every day. You put so much good content on there. I think it really is the best starting place to find your others, your other resources, which I think are very useful for people.
Grazie mille.
And if anybody's listening to this and interested in the process of getting Italian citizenship through Ancestry, if you're thinking about it, go over to becomeitaliani.com. Reach out to my business partner, Christina. She's an attorney. Can answer any of your questions about that. Again, I'll put a link to that in the description. And that's it. Margherita, grazie mille. This was really great. Thank you so much for your time.
Grazie a te. Ti ringrazio molto. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.